Good afternoon, and welcome to Behind the Inspiration Podcast. I am your host, Ken Waller. And in honor of Women's History Month, I have a special guest today, Miss Betty Hines. Miss Betty Hines is a business strategist consultant. Miss Betty Hines is the CEO, and she's part of a management team for both private and public sectors. However, most people know her as a chief facilitator, chief collaborator, and she's also a women's business advocate and founder of W.E.W, which stands for Women Elevating Women. So without further ado, I just want to thank Ms. Hines for joining the Behind the Inspiration Podcast. This podcast is based on a platform of encouragement, motivation, and of course, inspiration. So Ms. Hines, welcome again to Behind the Inspiration Podcast, and you have the floor. I just thank you so much for joining us. So there you go. So Ms. Hines, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, and thank you for having me during Women's History Month. I have to make sure my daughter and son see this podcast to know that I'm doing a podcast on Women's History Month. But it is an honor and a pleasure, and I'm glad to be here to tell my story, to share some of my story.
Thank you so much.
Some of my story, as you mentioned, I am a business strategist, but specifically I work with women. I'm a women business strategist, and there is a difference. I work specifically with women that are entrepreneurs, and lately I've moved back into working with women who are executives. And why women elevating women? The reason for women elevating women is that I have worked for 15 years with women who ran multi-million dollar companies. In fact, I did have a group for a couple of years, 2-3 years, where there was 4 billionaires in my group. And that was we had different sectors that we worked with these women. And the organization was called Women Presidents Organization. And this organization, and I'll refer to it as WEW, this organization really opened my eyes onto seeing how women would come together as peers at these annual conferences, and they would freely share information. They would freely share resources, plus also the organization gave them a lot of information. And what they say is that they bring the genius out of these women, and they do. So I started facilitating this group of women, and what we do is that we try to find out what are some of their pressing issues, and we do what is called a roundtable. And in the roundtable discussion, we ask them clarifying questions. We don't ask them questions directly because we know women don't want to be told what to do. So we ask the clarifying questions, because generally speaking, when there's a problem, they know the answer. They're really seeking affirmation as this is what they need to do, this is the next thing to do. However, having worked with these groups, and statistically, let me share this with you first, is that in this country, less than 3% all women have a revenue base of $1 million, gross revenues of 1 million. And I share that because with the WPO, to be invited into the organization, your minimum gross revenues are 1 million and 2 million if you're product based. So it's a very elite group. So I work with these women and met a lot of them, and they have scaled their businesses. But what I found in attending the conferences is that there were few women of color. So after all these years of working with them, I still keep my foot in the $1 billion club women. I still have a group of women that I work with. There's 22 of them, but I realize there's a 97%. So that 97% that aren't at that threshold, what's going on with them? So if you segregate that number and you look at women of color, and specifically African American women, barely 0.5%, like a fraction, are at that. They're at that level. They get stuck around $100,000 and $250,000. For that reason, I made a decision, a very conscious decision, that I want to share the knowledge that I had. I want to get these women together and have them share their resources, because I developed, based off my experiences with women, 5 pillars of success. Okay. And what I see, women, why we get stuck, especially African American women, women of color, why we get stuck at that 100, 250,000 range is because, number one, we don't do collaboration. That's a label we have, and I don't wear it proudly, but we don't know how to collaborate. And this is where we lack an understanding and value of social capital. The social capital essentially is how to collaborate. And the other thing is how to connect, how to make the right connections. Who do you connect with? And there's another thing that I see is how to communicate. And when I say communicate, it's not speaking well. How do you brand? We don't do well in branding personal brand or branding our company. And then I also talked about courage. And the courage is not being big and strong. I talk about courage as far as taking care of, having the courage to take care of your health and to take care of your wealth. Often we as women will take care of everybody else and put ourselves on the back burner. And the last one, and probably one of the most important, is cultivate. We need to learn how to cultivate our youth, prepare the others to take on this endeavor, be them an entrepreneur or be them an executive. So that is my passion, and that is my purpose. It's about women elevating women.
Wow.
It's because if women elevate each other, there's enough out there for us all.
Wow. You know, Ms. Hines, I tell you that, I don't even know how to really follow up with that, because that's some awesome information you just passed on, based on the fact that you came from corporate America. So
yes,
you understand the structure and the nature of what it takes really to elevate others, especially when it comes to women entrepreneurs, because you've seen it, you've been there. And one thing that you did mention is the fact of cultivating others. I've been a mentor. I've been mentoring for a very long time. And that's one thing that I really try to hang my hat on, is what can we do in reference to building legacy into what we're doing. Most of us are taught to go to school and get that good job and keep on going. But how many of our kids have focused on the fact of being able to, of course, go to school, practice your particular craft, but then start your business? I believe that that's one of the shortcomings that we all have, especially in our own Black African-American community, that we have to do exactly those particular things that you mentioned. We have to cultivate. And the fact that, you know, not only do you do pretty much the consulting of entrepreneurs, women in you know, around locally, you also work with a group that's worldwide. Is that correct? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I do. I work with a couple of groups. The Women Presidents Organization is a global operation. They have chapters. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I'll be meeting with a chapter from Turkey. And with my WEW, I was able, this is the outcome of COVID, not having to have the brick and mortar or the Marriotts or the hotels to have a meeting virtually. Virtually, I've been able to reach out, and I've spoke in Nigeria. I've had guests on my conferences from South Africa, from the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, all over the world. I think I said South Africa, yes. And I had them speak because the challenges are the same. And I think we can attest to, particularly in the UK, you know, the systemic issues with racism, are alive and well. So yes, I do that. And the reason why is because with the Women Elevating Women, I have people throughout the country. They're not all based in the Maryland, DMV area. They come from Georgia, they're from around. And that reach is going out to different countries, because the women that I'm targeting or that I'm looking to bring into the fold are those women who also have some cultural differences. They too need that camaraderie. They also need that tribe that they work with to bounce off those ideas. So I do work with them. And there's one that's called Grow Your Business. I just spoke last week in Canada. I was at a conference, and one of the banks there, the Bank of Montreal, had me on a podcast during Black History Month. And so, yes, I believe that in order for us being people of color, African Americans, we need to be entrepreneurs. And that's something that is not taught at our breakfast table. At least it wasn't in mine. And a young man from South Africa told me, he said, he says, the way the school systems are designed, they don't teach you to be an independent thinker, to be an entrepreneur. they teach you enough and you learn so that you can work for somebody else.
Wow.
And that gave me pause. And, my kids are grown and they're adults, but it gave me pause in terms of, wow. So they really aren't teaching them to be an entrepreneur. And I feel that in order for us to survive and thrive as women of color, we need to be in that entrepreneurial mindset. And until they make that gender and change, until that equation is changed, you may have all these diversity and equity and inclusion platforms. We need to have our own.
Ms. Hines, and that's just, it's so powerful that it leads me to my next question. I see the passion, I hear the passion. I watch what you do professionally, and I just have to ask you, what inspires you? What inspired you to do the things that you're doing?
A lot of it has to do with my mother, who you knew.
Mm-hmm, I did.
You knew she just passed not too long ago. I watched her, very bright lady, born and raised in Evanston, Illinois, where there weren't many people of color, and she graduated salutatorian of her class. But that thinking back there, it would not allow her, even though she had a scholarship to Howard, her father, my grandfather, would not allow her to go. Because the men, her older brothers, were going off to service. She wasn't allowed to go to get that education. So she married a military man. I'm an Army brat, traveled all over the world. We settled in the Midwest. And she worked hard because she had 6 kids. And she worked very, very hard in the kitchen, and she just honed her skills. Then after she put all of us through college, and I'm the last one out of 6 through college, she made a decision, a conscious decision. This is my dream. I'm going to do more. So she went back to college when she was like 45, 47, went to Michigan State, graduated in food science. And then I moved her with me to Ohio. She retired with the Cleveland Clinic, but she had a late start. But that was her goal. And it's like to never give up on your dreams. Wow. You might start at one place, but you have to. I believe God has put you on this planet, this earth, for a purpose. Amen. And you need to fulfill your purpose in life. And my purpose is my passion. And that's to help other women, because I did go into corporate America and had a very successful career there. I did have a property and casualty company, not an agency, with my husband. And it was a bad time, 9/11, Enron, plus I don't think the community at large was ready for an African-American privately held insurance company. Mm-hmm. So with that all being said, I just felt that I don't want women to have the same missteps that I made. And I always reflect back on what my mother did, how she continued on. She persevered through all the ups and the downs that life presents you, and she followed her passion.
Wow. So Ms. Hines, I mean, that was awesome, because it just rolled me over to my next question. We're going right along here. I was going to ask you who inspired you, but we just heard that your mother did, and like you mentioned, I did have an opportunity to know your mother. We attended the same church, and it's really funny because, the world is really small, and you never know whose path you're going to go back, cross again in life. So it's very important to bring somebody else up as you're going. I pride myself on what I do in regards just even to this podcast. This podcast isn't about me. This podcast is about inspiring others to do better, to be better, so they can have better. Build legacy, build understanding, try to lift somebody up, and that's what this podcast is all about. And I'm just like super thrilled that you saw fit to join me, because I know 1,000% that you're extremely busy, and I'm glad you had an opportunity to join Behind the Inspiration podcast. But I do have one more question for you. That question would be, what is it that you can share with our listeners that would inspire them to move forward in whatever they're moving forward in?
Sure. There was a young lady when I was doing my WEW conferences in Atlanta, and her name is Maya Penn. She was 18 at the time, so that was like 2-3 years ago. And we were in a conversation, but she ended the conversation with, "I need you and you need me." She said, because there's enough sky out there for all of us. So that resonated with me. And so I realized that once I continued to go through what I'm doing right now and working with the women, that we need to have a full understanding of the value of social capital. There is a feminist, a woman, and she made the comment, and I'm going to get her name correctly here. It is Mary Church Terrell. And what she said essentially is that we must lift as we climb.
Wow.
And so those words are with me right now. And that is why we need to elevate each other. I get satisfaction when I elevate someone else. It's just a joy that comes over my spirit and wants me to do more of that. And so if we would do that with each other, if we would just elevate, edify, lift each other up, share information, share resources, then this would be then we, as a people, as women, will learn how to scale. We can keep elevating.
Wow. On that note, Ms. Hines, again, I am so super thrilled that you took the opportunity or took the time
My pleasure.
to join me for this particular podcast. I do believe that our listeners will take heed to those words because it's very important for them to hear that. A lot of times I say the same thing, however, but coming from someone like yourself, who's seen it, who's been there, who's lived it, and understand that, just like your organization, Women Elevating Women, is powerful, is present, is well needed, and also again in all respect to Women's History Month, I do believe that you will be somebody that we can look back to in history as someone who reached out wide, high, far to make sure that you're a part of that elevation process by lifting up each other in everything that we do. So again, Ms. Hines, thank you very much for joining Behind the Inspiration podcast. Thank you, family, for listening. Please join this podcast again next week, as we will have another inspirational guest. If you would like to have information on Ms. Hines, you can look in the show notes and find information on how to contact her. I do know for sure right off the top of my head, you can reach her at bettyhines.com. bettyhines.com, and the other information will be in the show notes at the end of this podcast. So please, family, stay close to each other, stay encouraged, be motivated to help somebody. And first and foremost, thank God for all the opportunities that we have and be inspired. Thank you very much. We look forward to talking with you soon.